Welcome. It is Verdict with Ted Cruz Weekend Review. Ben Ferguson with you, and here are some of the big stories that you may have missed that we talked about this week. First up, Democrats, they're pretty upset over the government shutdown, but what they're really upset about is your subsidies. Billions and billions of dollars in payouts going to insurance companies that are getting rich. Obamacare is broken, known as the Affordable Care Act. It's anything but, and we'll explain it to you. Also, why are Democrats so angry with John Fetterman for just doing the right thing and saying it's time to open the government? We'll explain that as well. And finally, more violence as Antifa attacks at a Turning Point USA gathering. It's the Weekend Review, and it starts right now.
And the president, he was in a good mood, but he was expressing his views emphatically, as he always does.
Yeah. By the way, for people that have ever done a phone call, like if you've never gotten to do this, he does not ever hold back when you're talking to him on the phone. I not a single phone call. You've had a lot more than I have. But when I've had phone calls with him, whether it was in 16 to 20 or now forward, like he does not hold back at all when you're on the cell phone, on speakerphone as well.
He does not. So one of the things we asked of him Friday night, we said, listen, in this battle with the Democrats over Obamacare is failing. It's a bad program. And if you go back to 2013 when I did a filibuster against Obamacare, I said at the time, if you remember, Barack Obama promised the American people Obamacare would cut the average family's premiums by $2,500 a year.
Yep.
That was a lie. And in fact, they skyrocketed at the time, $5,000 a year. They've skyrocketed a lot more than that. Even the Washington Post has now admitted, the editorial page, the Affordable Care Act, which is the misleading name of Obamacare, did not make health care more affordable. It caused premiums to skyrocket. So when we had Trump on the phone, we said, look, it would really help if you made the case that what Democrats are fighting for is these massive multi-billion-dollar corporate welfare payoffs to the health insurance companies, instead of empowering consumers. And look, we want to lower prices. And so we said in particular, it would really help if you would send a truth. And Trump said, great, come up with something. And so I will tell you what the president sent. I had a lot of input in this. And here's what he put out. President Trump said, Democrats claim to be working for, quote, the little guy and driving down your health insurance. But and the rest of this is in all caps, Obamacare scam goes straight to their best friends in the insurance industry. They are making a killing, while health coverage only gets worse. Yeah. If Democrats get their way again, they're in for another huge payday at the expense of the American people. No deal, in all caps. Republicans should give money directly to your personal health savings accounts, all in caps, that I expanded in our great big beautiful bill. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Now, this is really important because if you want a really strong, principled, conservative reform to health insurance, expanding health savings accounts so that you give you, the consumer, you, the patient, more control, and instead of sending money to the insurance companies, send it straight to people's health savings accounts so you can spend it on premiums, you can spend it on deductibles, you can spend it on health care. That expands competition, it empowers patients, and it lowers prices. The president leaning in with this tweet really helps in this political battle we'll have over the next 6 weeks, because the outcome he's advocating for is something I've advocated for a long time, and that was a direct result of that dinner on Friday night where we got him on the phone.
You know, there's one interesting thing that's coming out of this first year of Trump being back in office. It is really empowering the American people, whether it is the accounts you just talked about, whether it's the Trump accounts that are going to be coming in this next year that you guys pass to give kids the opportunity to save money and to be able to grow accounts and to build wealth over their lifetime. Like, there is a lot of personal growth and personal excitement that Trump is get the government out of your life. You can do better without it. We want to help you do that. And then the Democrats like, no. Mandani's and others, you should have no control of your life. We want to run the whole damn show from birth to death. just trust the U.S. government to be your daddy or your mommy or both. And that's exactly the difference between the Republicans and Democrats right now.
Look, it's a fundamental divide. As you noted, we passed the Trump accounts. As you know well, I wrote that legislation.
Yep.
This has been a major theme that I've been fighting for since the first day I got elected to the Senate. And whether you're talking about health savings accounts, whether you're talking about Trump accounts that are essentially 401k savings accounts for kids, or whether you're talking about school choice and getting tax credits, the unifying theme of all of those is individual choice, empowering you, the individual, rather than government, competition, and giving you control. That is the fundamental difference between left and right. And President Trump has been a great partner in this. And I'll tell you, as a part of his tweet, he sent out a chart which I had sent him. But I want you to see the chart. We're going to put it up on YouTube for anyone that's watching it on YouTube. But it goes through the major healthcare companies, their stock performance since Obamacare passed. So I'm going to walk through them. Aetna, Obamacare, March 2010 is when it passed. Aetna's stock price was $30.50. Today it's $212. So it's increased 595% since Obamacare passed. Centene, its stock has increased 604%. Molina, its stock has increased 859%. Humana, its stock has increased 490%. Anthem, Elevance Health, its stock has increased 414%. Cigna, its stock has increased 822%. And United Health Group, when Obamacare passed, United Health stock was $25.66. Today, November 2025, it is $327.74. That is a 1,177% increase. That's what Obamacare did. It massively increased the profits of the health insurance companies. By the way, those health insurance companies overwhelmingly give to Democrats. They give to Chuck Schumer. They give to Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats because they recognize when Democrats are in power, their profits go through the roof and the American people's premiums skyrocket. What do the Democrats say they wanted to do in this shutdown? Give $50 billion to those same health insurance companies whose profits have skyrocketed. And it's why what the president said is so important. No, we're not going to give money to health insurance companies. Instead, we're going to expand health savings accounts so you, the individual, has control over your own health care.
Senator, I also want to get a little preview of something that you're working on. We're going to do a more expansive show on this, but it's important that people know that even while the government has been shut down, you have been working very hard on other things. One of those things is you've now introduced the, quote, Deporting Fraudsters Act of 2025, and it deals with SNAP and public benefits abuses that is costing the American people millions and millions of dollars. Give us a little preview of this so people know what's been going on.
Look, this is a very simple bill. It is an astonishing fact that right now, welfare fraud, fraudulently taking government assistance benefits, is not a deportable offense under the immigration laws. This law will change that and make it a deportable offense. Let me give you some basic statistics. 48% of households headed by illegal immigrants received food-related welfare benefits. 48%, nearly half. Specifically SNAP. A CIS analysis found that 31% of illegal alien households with children draw SNAP benefits. 1 in 5 households getting WIC, Women's, Infants, and Children, or SNAP, is headed by a non-citizen, and 96% of the children in those households are U.S. born, showing how illegal aliens exploit child-based eligibility to access benefits indirectly. The U.S. Department of Agriculture reports 1.76 million non-citizens on SNAP in 2023. Wow. That is roughly $312 million in taxpayer funds. In 2012, or not 2012, rather 2022, it was 1.5 million recipients. That cost $222 million. Fraud is rampant. For example, in 2024, $126.8 million was stolen from EBT cards. In Texas, 3.7 million people, about 11% of the state, relies on SNAP. Every stolen or unlawfully claimed dollar robs a citizen family in genuine need. And according to the CBO, about 200,000 illegal aliens from the surge of alien asylum seekers from 2023 to 2024 already received SNAP, growing to 800,000 by 2034, assuming no deportations. A 10-year cost, you said this cost millions?
Yeah.
The 10-year cost is $15 billion.
Gosh.
And so this bill is to target that and say if you're here illegally, you do not have any entitlement to public welfare. And if you fraudulently access public welfare, that is yet another ground to deport you.
Now, Chuck Schumer's a co-sponsor of this bill, right?
No. And I feel confident that Schumer is not just a no, he's a hell no, because today's Democrat Party, it is all for giant health insurance corporations, it is all for illegal immigrants, it is all for violent criminals, it is all for men and women's sports, it's all for everyone except the average American citizen trying to work hard and provide for his or her family, and that's exactly backwards.
Now, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you can go back and listen to the full podcast from earlier this week. Now on to story number 2. This is a civil war, let's be clear, and that's part of what I got to ask you about is there are Democrats now that are basically like off with his head in leadership. They want him gone. They're publicly saying that. They're saying this is the end of him. He is done. MSNBC said it multiple times. CNN commentators said the same thing. Like, he's done. They got to get rid of him. His career's over. This goes back to the being held hostage by the Marxists, the socialists, and the communists of the Democratic Party now. They didn't police them. Now they're running the party, and they're anarchists. And Chuck Schumer shut down the government for the longest period in history of this country, and that wasn't good enough for them.
And he still voted no on reopening it. So he shut it down for the longest in history. He voted no consistently, and yet they're still off with his head. It really is. The crazies are driving the Democrat Party. And look, if you don't believe me, maybe you will believe John Fetterman. I want you to listen to this exchange. Senator John Fetterman, Democrat from Pennsylvania, was on The View. And Sonny, one of the left-wing hosts there, comes after him hard. Listen to her unhinged question and then listen to Fetterman's response.
Well, Senator, Bernie Sanders said the vote was a horrific mistake. Governor Gavin Newsom called it pathetic and a surrender. Poll after poll found more Americans on both sides of the aisle blaming Republicans. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene blamed the GOP. As you mentioned, Democrats had big wins last week, so you had momentum. Why give in now? Why bring a butter knife to a gunfight? Are you willing to gamble that the GOP will negotiate on health care in good faith once the government reopens? Because if that gamble is wrong, 500,000 Pennsylvanians that you represent, their health care costs will skyrocket if you are wrong. And I believe you are wrong.
Well, first of all, MTG is quite literally the last person in America that I'm going to take advice or to get their kinds of my leadership and values from. And now, if Democrats are celebrating crazy pants like that, then that's on them. And now I don't need a lecture. I don't need a lecture from whether it's Bernie or the governor in California, because they are representing very deep blue kinds of populations, and a lot of those things were part of the extreme. And now remember, what really needs to win, the big win, is involving my state and other states and those things. And why have we arrived here after the election a year ago? We got to forget some of the things that cost us that election. Or now, for me, it's like, that's why I'm trying to remind people that kinds of the extremism, we can't return to those kind of things and realize we need to find a way forward. And I would like to, rather than cite MTG, I'm going to cite one of the new governor-elects saying that my election is not a green light to continue the shutdown, because I promise you, this isn't a political game. It is viewed by many of us, but the reality is 42 million Americans now not sure where their next meal is going to come from, and because we vote like that, or people that haven't been paid for 5 weeks now, and that kinds of chaos. Those workers have to borrow more than $500 million, from their credit union just to pay their bills now.
You listen to him talking about paying their bills, and I love that from Fetterman there. They also were very quiet because I don't think they realized he was going to come back with facts that way and describe it. I jokingly said to you before the show started, when's John Fetterman going to join the Republican Party? Because he's been speaking an awful lot of truth about the reality of this shutdown.
Well, look, I like John Fetterman, and I will tell you, Republicans actually treat him much more nicely than the Democrats do. The Democrats are mean to him. They're vicious to him. They really have a deep antipathy to him. And the amazing thing is he votes the overwhelming majority of the time with the Democrats. He's on the Commerce Committee with me. On virtually every vote, he votes party line with the Democrats. On most votes on the floor, he votes party line with the Democrats. He has a few defections, so he did vote to open the government. And that's viewed as this great heresy because he didn't want to force a government shutdown and hurt millions of Americans and continue the longest government shutdown in history. And the main area that he's been willing to dissent from virtually every other congressional Democrat is in support of Israel. And we've talked about before that there is a real and cognizable pro-Hamas caucus in the Democrat Party. It rose up about 10 years ago. The Democrats did nothing. They looked the other way, and it's now taken over their party. And Fetterman is a massive outlier because he is genuinely pro-Israel. He is vocally pro-Israel, and the radicals in the Democrat Party hate him for that. And again, if you don't believe me, listen to what John Fetterman said on exactly this topic.
You are not Jewish, at least as far as I know.
Feel
free to come out here to me right now. But you have been one of the most outspoken. It's beyond Washington. It's beyond politicians. You have been one of the most outspoken people in American life on the issue of anti-Semitism. Why is this issue so important to you?
Ironically, I did that 23andMe. I'm 97% German and 3% Neanderthal. And it's like, maybe it's ironic that a big German guy from Pennsylvania who's been very absolutely devoted to Israel and to experience the kind of anti-Semitism in my life. I mean, the Tree of Life. I mean, that's where you're from too. Absolutely appalling. And my heart breaks for what the Jewish communities suffered, especially after 10/7. I've had the honor of meeting, members of the hostages, former people that were kept underground for 500 days. I mean, those are heroes. I've met with widows. Their husbands were lost in the Gaza war, and they have 8 children, raising 8 children by their own. That's a hero for all of it. So for me, it's heartbreaking. And that's been what's so difficult for me is like being devotion to Israel becoming increasingly incompatible with being a proud Democrat now too. And that's put me at odds. And the things that put me at odds have all converged at the same time. The Gaza war, the peace deal, and then we moved right into a shutdown. Like now Democrats might not be allowed to hold these views. And I'm not changing my party. And, run the numbers. You would find that I'm a Democrat.
He is a Democrat, but you've walked past his Senate office countless times. I've walked past it probably dozens of times when I'm up in D.C. And he had all the hostage pictures up in his front office, which I thought was incredible.
Look, he has been genuinely courageous and sincerely courageous on Israel. And it's earned the absolute ire, hatred, animosity, venom of the radical left in the Democrat Party. I mean, you heard what he just said there, that being pro-Israel is becoming incompatible with being a proud Democrat. I mean, that's a tragic statement. I wish that statement were not true, but it is the biggest reason why their radicals hate him. And much of when he was first elected and he came into office, he had had a stroke during the campaign. And the stroke was very debilitating. When John showed up, the stroke really limited, like when I first met him, what the stroke did is it limited his ability to process auditory input. So you would talk to him, and his brain was not able to process the words he was hearing. And so he would carry with him an iPad that had a translator, because this is one of the consequences that can be from a stroke, is your ability to process words that you hear. Your brain just can't put them together. So you would talk and he would read it. But when he first got there, you would talk to him and he was not able to understand what you were saying. And it hurt your heart. I mean, he's a very bright man. The man's a Harvard graduate, but he had a medical issue that he had real consequences. Early on, the Democrats all circled around him and said he's perfectly capable. There are no issues whatsoever, because they assumed he would be a left-wing Democrat. That's what they expected of him. That was not a crazy expectation going in. And then when he started standing up, particularly on Israel, standing up and defying the pro-Hamas caucus, you started seeing the Democrats leaking and planning stories and really attacking his mental capability. And the irony is, look, you heard in those exchanges, he's now able to have a conversation. He still is a little halting in his communication, and I think that's some of the aftermath of the stroke. But the difference is night and day. You can now have a conversation, and he can hear you in a way that when he showed up in the Senate, he was not able to. And yet, Democrats are running to reporters to plant negative stories, attacking him. Many of his colleagues want to drive him out of the party. And at least on the Republican side, I like John, and I think consistently all the Republicans are just trying to be nice to him. By the way, they did the same thing to Joe Manchin. They did the same thing to Kyrsten Sinema, and they succeeded in driving both of them out of the party because they want no dissent. You must obey and follow orders, or they'll do everything they can to drive you out. And to be honest, both Sinema and Manchin, I think Republicans were much nicer to than Democrats were, and the consequence was they were both driven out of the party.
As before, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation on this topic, you can go back and download the podcast from earlier this week to hear the entire thing. I want to get back to the big story, number 3 of the week you may have missed.
All right, I want to end the show with talking about something else that has really made me sad this week. It's also, I think, really telling you where we are as a country with the radical left. We have seen violent protesters at a Turning Point USA event at UC Berkeley. I wish it wasn't what we witnessed, but it was radical leftists. I want to know who's funding them, Senator. I want to know who's behind this. But it is shocking to see this level of rhetoric and attacks on conservatives who are just going to have a conversation. And it's very eerily close to what we witnessed with the assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, look, the pattern of left-wing violence continues, and it continues across the country, and it continues with the acquiescence and support of many on the far left, far too many on the far left. This week, Turning Point USA had a rally at UC Berkeley. Now, the speakers at the rally were Dr. Frank Turek, who's a Christian pastor, and Rob Schneider, who's a comedian and actor. So it's not like either of these speakers were particularly controversial in any normal or sane place. But UC Berkeley is not necessarily a normal or sane place. And Antifa targeted them, targeted the people coming into the rally, coming in to see, listen to the speakers, and they were violent. Let me read how Fox covered it. A bloody fight broke out near the University of California, Berkeley on Monday afternoon ahead of a Turning Point USA event on campus. The event, which featured Dr. Frank Turek and Rob Schneider, marked the end of the This Is Turning Point tour. It took place just 2 months after Turning Point USA's founder, Charlie Kirk, was assassinated at a campus event in Utah on September 10th. The confrontation erupted around 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. During the brawl, 2 men were seen fighting each other, one of whom had blood gushing from his face. And you can watch the video taken by Fox News Digital, also shows a crowd of agitators gathered around the fight. These were left-wing Antifa activists. They were chanting obscene chants that they were celebrating that Charlie Kirk had been murdered. They were chanting how happy they are about that. Most of them had masks, and you can watch the video online of one of the people coming to the Turning Point event who they beat the hell out of him, and his face is bleeding profusely, and they engaged in violence. And I'll tell you, what is frustrating is, where was the administration of Berkeley? Where was the police? Why are they allowing violent protesters? And look, these are the same administrators. This is the same faculty that allowed their campuses to be taken over for weeks and months on end by radical anti-Semitic protesters, by Antifa communists, who again engaged in threats of violence. And in both instances, these are not organic. They're being paid for. I've been saying for a long time, follow the money. I've been urging the Department of Justice and the FBI to follow the money. I've introduced legislation, the Stop Funders Act, to add rioting as a predicate act to RICO, to let us go after the money that is behind these violent anarchists. And I'll tell you what's being reported now. This is another story Fox News covered. UC Berkeley's bloody protest of Turning Point USA, allegedly funded by far-left nonprofit. Attorney General Pam Bondi opens anti-terrorism investigation into campus clash outside Turning Point USA event. And here's what Fox reports. Last month, a band of demonstrators marched across West Temple Street in downtown Los Angeles in the national anti-Trump No Kings protest, carrying a banner that read, "Defeat Trump's fascist takeover, stop ICE raids, and deportations by any means necessary." And in one corner, 4 bold letters stood out. BAMN, an acronym for by any means necessary. The rest of the banner spelled out clues to the group's full name in smaller print. Quote, "Coalition to defend affirmative action, integration, and immigration rights and fight for equality by any means necessary." That organization, one of 266 groups with combined annual revenues of $2.9 billion, identified by Fox News Digital, leading the No Kings protests, would soon reappear at this week's flashpoint on the campus of University of California, Berkeley. And so this group, a flyer circulated before the demonstration, urged participants to, quote, "end fascist Turning Point's youth-oriented campaign of incitement to violence." Now, ironically, they're accusing Turning Point of incitement to violence, and they show up and violently assault the people who are going to Turning Point. It's classic Marxist technique of projecting and accusing your opponents of doing what you're doing. And this flyer announced a rally outside of Zellerbach Hall an hour before the doors opened for the event. Well, the good news is, and a QR page printed on the flyer leads to a page on BAMN.com, which is a domain of this group that was helping fund the No Kings rallies. And so there is an entire ecosystem with money flowing to promote violence. And thankfully, the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi has announced that they're doing an anti-terrorism investigation to follow the money. And I'll tell you also, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights is questioning why Berkeley allowed this to happen. In fact, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon formally demanded that UC Berkeley preserve all records regarding their response to the mob violence at Berkeley's Turning Point USA event. All records.
Good.
And that's because I suspect they're going to find emails, they're going to find administrators saying, communicating back and forth, just like we did with the anti-Semitic protesters, where it is clear that the administrators do not want to protect the people at Turning Point USA, do not want the police to stop violence if it's directed against conservatives, and there's a real moral decay at our universities, and I'm glad we have a Department of Justice that's willing to enforce the law and go after, number one, the money behind the left-wing violence, but number two, the administrators who are facilitating. And I got to say, it is not dissimilar to what's happening in Nigeria. We talked about a minute ago, where you have government officials who look the other way and refuse to enforce the law to protect Christians. In Berkeley's case, I suspect the evidence will indicate the school administrators look the other way and refuse to protect the students at Turning Point USA because they're rooting for the Antifa rioters who are physically assaulting those students.
As always, thank you for listening to Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Don't forget to download my podcast, and you can listen to my podcast every other day you're not listening to Verdict, or each day when you listen to Verdict afterwards. I'd love to have you as a listener to, again, the Ben Ferguson podcast, and we will see you back here on Monday morning.